Good evening and welcome to the September 20th. Ooh, there is amplification.
You
How
don't
do you
have
like
to lean
that?
forward
Want to
anymore.
lower that up?
I'll just lean further back from the microphone. Good evening and welcome to the September 20th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals here in the new and improved Selectmen's Meeting Room with amplification, as you can hear. We also have some new fancy flat-screen TVs for PowerPoint presentations throughout the night, so we're looking forward to seeing that.
No Boston Red Sox.
Unfortunately not.
Thursday night football.
I'll start the meeting by please asking you all to silence your cell phones, and I'll introduce the board at this time. Going from your left, my right, we have Jerry Patamas, who is an associate member of the board, followed by Ed Van Kuren, who is a full voting member. My name is Terrence Hurry. I'm the chairman of the board. To my left, we have Ken Foreman, who is the vice chairman of the board. To his left, we have Paul Murphy, who is a voting member of the board, followed by Bob Dugan, who is an associate member. We also have with us tonight Sri Boudreau, the zoning administrator, and Joe Robbins, who is our recording secretary. Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with applying the zoning bylaws for the town of Falmouth and considers requests for special permits, variances, and appeals as provided in the bylaws that have been approved by town meeting and the Attorney General's office for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All decisions made tonight are made through the public hearing process. The board's goal is to hear testimony from the applicants and from the public and to allow full and fair discussion of the project prior to rendering a decision. To begin the hearing, the clerk will read the public announcement of the hearing and then present any pertinent information from the file, such as any referrals from town departments and summarizing correspondences to the board. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and if deemed necessary, the time may be extended by vote of the board. The board will then ask questions of the applicant, and then the public will be invited to comment. Public comment should be directed only at the project, and please refrain from making any personal or derogatory statements. These statements can include an opinion in favor or in opposition, or it might just simply be a question about the nature of the project that you want answered. The chair will limit discussion in the interest of time if comments become too repetitive. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized by the chair and should come to the podium to the right. Please state your name and address for the record, and we usually limit public comment to 2 minutes per person. When the board is satisfied that enough information has been presented by testimony and in the file to make a decision, by motion and vote of the board, the hearing will be closed. Alternatively, the board may continue the hearing to a future time and date certain if we need more information. After the hearing is closed, no more testimony can be given. The board may then further discuss the project among ourselves and make a motion to deny or approve could be made and voted upon. Any motion will include a summary of key findings and conditions. An affirmative vote of 4 members is required for approval of motions on special permits, variances, and appeals. Split votes, such as a 3-2 vote, is a failure to carry and would result in denial of the project. Under Massachusetts general law, if a special permit is denied, the applicant cannot return to the board for 2 years unless the project is substantially different. Turning to the agenda for this evening, we have 1 continuation. We also have 4 new hearings, and we have open meeting items. So to start tonight, I will appoint Ed Van Kuren as clerk throughout this evening, and we will start with continuation 46-18 Groom, 70 Ostrom Road in Wacoit.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, could you designate an alternate to sit on this?
Yes, that will be Bob to start.
Thank you.
It being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Mott and Barbara J. Groom of Albuquerque, New Mexico, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance pursuant to Section 240-203 of the Code of Falmouth to allow a dwelling to be constructed within 50-foot setback of the area of critical environmental concern, 240-88, on subject property known as 70 Ostrom Road, Wacoit, Mass. Engineering Department, the typical comments, rights-of-ways, et cetera. The Water Department applicant must submit plan for approval to the Water Department. Minimum 1-inch service, but likely a 2-inch service will be required. And no letters from the butters.
And for the applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ahmet Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent the applicants, Mott and Barbara Groom, the owners of 70 Ostrom Road, and the petitioners in this matter. I'm joined tonight by Tom Bunker of BSS Design. This is going to throw me off because all I hear is my own silly voice echoing in my head right now.
Want me to turn it down?
It's okay.
Now you know what we hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're here tonight because the petitioners are requesting a variance under section 240-203. Specifically, they're seeking to deviate from sections 240-88, which is the geographical applicability of areas of a critical environmental concern, as well as section 240-89, which is the regulation of construction within areas of critical environmental concern. For your sake and mine, I'll be referring to that this evening as the ACEC. The ACEC is an area designated by the town, largely affecting Wacoit Bay and Red Brook. The boundary of the ACEC is determined by the landward edge of the AE flood zone. And the cited provisions of the bylaw impose a 50-foot buffer from that landward edge. 70 Ostrom Road, the parcel in question, is located in Wacoit, not far from Hamblin Pond and Red Brook and Wacoit Bay itself. And it has a very unusual shape. It's over an acre in size, of which 42,600 square feet are considered upland. It was created pursuant to a 1986 subdivision, which created 6 lots. The entrance area of this lot, you'll note, is this thing working? I don't know. Is a very thin neck, which is only 20 feet wide, which did meet the minimum requirements in 1986, but extends for almost 260 feet from Ostrom Road down to the wider portion of the lot. The southern end of the lot is tapered to a point. The background on this is important. The applicants purchased this property in March of 1992. They've owned it continuously since then and have paid taxes on it and relied on it as an asset for the past 26 years. It is vacant, and it's been vacant for the duration of the time they've owned it. In considering plans recently, it was determined that the present layout of the ACEC, with its related buffer, would render the lot essentially unbuildable. It's very important to note that this is a relatively recent development. These are not the conditions that were in place at the creation of the lot in 1986, or at the time of the applicant's purchase in 1992, or for the majority of their ownership. In 1986, this was essentially the ACEC and the related buffer zone. The ACEC, the flood zone is shown in blue. The hash mark is the related buffer zone. At the time of the purchase, the flood zone and correspondingly the ACEC were located further to the south, roughly at elevation 11, as measured by the old standard. The related ACEC setback, buffer setback, was similarly located to the south. However, in 2014, FEMA, which governs the federal flood insurance program, changed the flood maps for the first time in about 30 years. And in doing so, they also changed the datum by which elevation is measured. The result of this is a change from AE 11 under the old datum to AE 13 under the new datum. It's a significant change with a significant landward movement of the flood zone and, in this case, the ACEC buffer. It's a substantial change. One aside as I go through this is that it's ironic that if the flood zone on this lot were actually worse, a worse flood zone would be a better result for the applicants, because section 240-88 states that if a lot's totally encompassed by the flood zone, then the setback's only 100 feet to the edge of the wetlands. Regardless, the result of this change renders the lot essentially unbuildable. The remaining envelope does not provide enough space for the dwelling and the wastewater system while meeting all the necessary setbacks. We believe that a lessening of the required buffer setback under the ACEC is appropriate in this instance, and it would allow for an appropriately sized dwelling without any substantial detriment to the public good. Section 240-203 allows for this board to grant a variance from the zoning bylaw when there's a situation due to soil conditions, lot shape, or topography of the land, especially affecting such land, but not affecting generally the zoning district in which it is located, when a literal enforcement of the provisions of this chapter would involve a substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, to the petitioner. In this instance, the ACEC buffer zone, as determined by the wetlands and the flood zone elevations, and specifically the 2014 change to those elevations, as affected by the peculiar and unique shape and topography of this lot, present a circumstance where a literal enforcement of the bylaw would cause a substantial hardship. Without a variance, this lot, which the Grooms have owned since 1992, paid taxes on as a buildable lot since 1992, and relied upon as an asset since 1992, would be deemed unbuildable, thereby significantly decreasing its value, being a substantial economic hardship to them, as this has been a part of their plan for quite a while, 26 years. The relief sought by this variance is desirable. It provides relief to the applicants. It's similar to the other nearby properties, and it does not have a substantial detriment to the public good. As mentioned previously, the lot shape of this is pretty unique. The initial entrance area is 20 feet wide. It's over 260 feet in length, and the entirety of that area, which is about 5,000 square feet, is unbuildable due to setback requirements. Any building envelope would need to be set south of there, within the area we are requesting. When considered in conjunction with the topographical issues I've discussed, specifically the flood zones and the elevations, and the unique characteristics, a variance, I think, is warranted. One clarification I wanted to make, and I spoke to Sri about today, and I mentioned in my letter that I submitted last week, was what we're not seeking is permission to build the house with the plans that were submitted. Those plans were submitted at the request of the zoning administrator in order to provide an illustration of what might be able to be built there. We gave a footprint based on a house of the appropriate, what we felt would be the appropriate and approximate size. And in doing so, Ms. Boudreau had asked for further plans, which we supplied, but that's not what we're requesting. If this variance is granted, the applicants would then go through a design process and and essentially have to go through the permitting process with the building department and conservation and the other appropriate boards. Those are intended to be illustrative. However, in doing so, we did complete some lot size comparisons for this area. And as you'll see with what we submitted in our initial application, the proposed house, or the illustrative house, would be well under the average gross building area and within the range of the average footprint. Of the 4 closest houses, 2 would have larger footprints and all 4 would have larger gross building areas. This house, this building envelope would not be the closest to the wetlands. At the closest point of the dwelling within this envelope would be approximately 145 feet from the wetlands. Within the immediate area, 60 Ostrom Road's about 113 feet, 92 Ostrom Road's about 113 feet, and 102 Ostrom Road is about 107 feet. This request for a variance is analogous in many ways to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 6, as well as our bylaw, Section 240-66, which both state essentially that a lot is not rendered unbuildable due to subsequent zoning changes. The situation with the ACEC is no different from a practical standpoint. Both the Commonwealth and the town have sought to protect landowner rights in that situation, and this is essentially the same. In considering the impact of this variance, I think it's important to note that there are a number of other safeguards that are in place. This would be subject to Conservation Commission jurisdiction. This is subject to the Rivers Act, which would limit disturbance of any area within that jurisdiction to 5,000 square feet in order to ensure protection of the environment. To further that point, I've mentioned previously that if the entirety of the lot was to be in the flood zone, the required setback would only be 100 feet from the wetlands, a far larger area than what we're requesting today. In summary, what we're trying to say is the unique shape and topography of this lot, coupled with the effects of the ACEC, present a circumstance where a literal enforcement of sections 240, 88, and 89 would cause a substantial hardship to the applicants. We believe that desirable relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. For these reasons, I believe the board can and should grant a variance. I'd be happy to address any questions you may have at this time.
Bob, do you want to start off with questions?
Just a question regarding the footprint. So the footprint then could increase, because you're just giving a proposed?
I mean, theoretically, I think that's about the size that'd be looking, you know, they or anyone would be looking for. That's in line with what the other homes in the area are. And again, it would be subject to Conservation Commission jurisdiction.
That's all I have.
Paul?
I have no questions.
Ken, any questions?
Yeah, I had that, sort of the same question or concern is that if we were to grant this, could we have some assurance that the footprint would not get any larger than what you're proposing in this plan, number one?
I mean, I'd have to speak with my clients. I'd have no objection to a limitation on the size of the footprint. I think, but what we're looking for essentially is a building envelope approval.
Oh, that's the footprint, is it not?
The footprint's certainly within that building envelope.
The second question I had is, so prior to the ACEC being implemented, there was no topographic reason why you couldn't build. Is that correct?
Even after the ACEC was implemented in 1986, there was much more space in which it could be built. This is the 1986 ACEC plan, essentially. So that shows what would have been the space that would have been allowed for buildable in 1986, even after the implementation of the ACEC.
Okay, so how, so the topography itself has not changed, it's simply the regulations that have changed?
Correct.
Okay, I'm just not sure, in my understanding of the rules for variances, whether that constitutes a topographic impediment. It's a regulatory impediment, for sure.
Sure, but I think the specific topography of this lot, in conjunction with the change of the regulatory aspect, and the shape of the lot in conjunction with the regulatory aspects, are such that it being unbuildable is certainly an economic hardship, and it's only unbuildable due to the regulatory effects,
What was the intent of the ACEC?
presumably for environmental protection, which is still being met here because of the fact that if the situation were worse, it's a lesser impact, which is ironic to say the least, but no, I think the environment can still be served by the other protections that are afforded under the Conservation Commission and under the Rivers Act, without a substantial detriment to the public good, which is what the standard is under the variance.
So what are some of those protections?
So the amount of disturbed area would be limited. The disturbed area is limited to 5,000 square feet within the Rivers Act jurisdiction. And Tom, is that 200 feet? That's within 200 feet of the wetlands. Probably under. So if this line here, I believe, because that's not the ACEC. There's an area within 200 feet of the wetlands that's subject to the Rivers Act, and any disturbance within that area is limited to 5,000 square feet
Within the area?
within that area. And essentially the entirety of what I'm going to call the envelope, which is this section from here south, would be within that area. So you'd have a limitation as to what can be disturbed in that area anyways.
Do you have this plan on one of them?
I don't, that's the one that was I think, the original submission. I don't, So this line right here is the edge of the Rivers Act area.
Okay.
So anything south of there would be limited to a disturbance of no more than 5,000 square feet.
And CONSCOM?
It is subject to Conservation Commission jurisdiction. It's within the 100-foot 100-foot buffer, so part of that is A zone, part of that is B zone.
I could just say, for the record, my name is Tom Bunker, BSS Design. That footprint that we have there, allowing for some, let's say, lawn and gardens around it, is basically 5,000 square feet of disturbance, so you really can't get based on the Riverfront Act, you can't put something bigger or substantially bigger than what we show there.
Okay, thank you. That's what I got for now.
Ed, any questions?
No, not at this time.
Jerry?
I guess I share with some of the other colleagues the idea that we're approving a plan. Is there some way we could hold you to the bulk calculations that we have in front of us that shows the square foot, and I think what's the other thing, cubic feet, on your bulk calculations? I mean, that sort of will
So,
limit,
really,
making myself clear.
the plans were submitted at Cerie's request only because of the fact that we were looking for something illustrative. Really, what we're looking for is approval of the plan showing the setback. That's what we're looking for. Not so much the plan of that footprint, the plan showing the proposed,
Foot
showing the proposed setback.
and not the bulk.
We're not seeking permission for the bulk. That was only done for illustrative purposes at Cerie's request.
Now, this is in TMDL area? This is in the TMDL area, Coit Bay?
I'm sorry, I'm not,
What watershed is this in?
Wacoit Bay.
Coit Bay, so that's an impaired waterway. So at this point in time, you don't need, I don't think, to put in a advanced nitrogen system.
That's not what it's,
Well, I think that's beyond the board's purview with this application.
it's here strictly for a variance into
Yeah,
the
we
setback.
would have to go through the permitting process
Through
with the Board of Health and,
Well, it's just, I agree, but there is concern as new development goes into these sensitive areas, the amount of nitrogen, given that it's outside the board, it's not outside the concerns of many people in town.
sure.
Thank you.
Attorney Clower, you know that we don't see too many variances before this
No.
board. You've been practicing in this town long enough to know that. You spoke to the shape of the lot and the ACEC as impediments. Is there anything to do with the actual topography of the lot?
Well,
Regarding
the
variance.
requirement, the standard is soil conditions, lot shape, or topography. It's not all of the above.
Right.
So I think that the topography comes into play with the flood zones, and in relation to the flood zone, the ACEC setbacks. But I think when those are viewed in conjunction with the incredibly unique shape of this lot, it's such that a literal enforcement of the bylaw would create a substantial hardship.
And can you confirm the proposed buffer of the ACEC?
20.
20. And just out of curiosity, if you were to use the former flood maps, what would the distance be then?
So the 2016, I'm sorry, the 1986 ACEC shows, so I guess your question is, what is it compared to this?
Right, what would be the buffer if you were to use the previous flood map as?
I mean, this still has a 50-foot buffer from the ACEC, but the flood line determination was further south.
I see.
What we're requesting is actually less than what would have been allowed under the old. I think if you look here, you'll see this line here, this dashed line right here, is what we're requesting today, which is less than what would have been allowed under this.
And how long have the current owners?
26
owned the
years.
property? 26 years?
Mhm.
Any other questions from the board? Sari, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Turning to members of the public, do you have any comments, questions, concerns? Yes, sir, if you'd like to come up here and please state your name and address for the record and
That has
address
to do
any,
with zoning.
right?
I'm Jack Mandelbaum. I own 60 Ostrom Roads. We had bought that property from the Grooms. And I would like to start by saying, no matter what the outcomes is, we like the Grooms, we're respectful, but we have a disagreement around this particular variance. The first thing I'd like to say is that I'd like to offer to take the economic hardship completely off the table. I'm willing to buy the land with the purpose of preserving it at a mediated, negotiated price that meets fair market
Yeah.
value.
Right, this is, can you speak to anything as to the actual application, the variance itself?
The majority of our neighbors are strongly opposed to building on this lot. We would all like to preserve the land and feel that there's a significant risk to the neighborhood and environment. The risks are associated with the fact that the intended use of the houses is an Airbnb. We have children in the neighborhood. We don't like to see an Airbnb in the risk. We also believe that the economics of the house don't play out and will end up in a negative environment for all of us. I'm willing to buy the house, the property at fair market value and remove the economic hardship completely that they're talking about.
Again, this is all hearsay that he's representing what the neighbors say. There were no letters submitted to the file, and this is getting out of the jurisdiction of the variance, so if you could please.
Okay, there's a lot of emails to support those points. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Bernice Mandelbaum, also at 60. My question is for Tom.
To the
Tom?
board, please.
To the board, and then
Oh,
it's,
okay. My question is regarding the stakeout of the premises and the definition of the proposed building line. To the extent that you are approving an entire envelope, and to the extent that the house is movable within that, I was curious as to the meaning of the staked area called proposed building line. There's a staked area called house, and a larger lateral staked area called proposed building line. And if you're agreeing to the whole thing, I'm just trying to understand whether the house can be moved to any point within the proposed building line.
thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Bunker, if you'd like to address those concerns?
If I can see down here, which one, this one? So on this plan, I'll try this highlighter tool. This line, the proposed building line, is this line we put right here. Oops, not very steady there, but that's the line that we're here to have that line approved as the setback line or the building line rather than the 50 feet from the ACEC. And that's the line that was staked on the ground.
How many feet does that take you into the ACEC? Is that where the 20-foot comes into play?
That's 20 feet from the ACC.
Some of it. Not all of the, if you see right, let me see, get something else. You see this area right here is 20 feet, and right here is 20 feet, but out here further, it's the full 50 feet, because you see this is the 50 feet line, your 50-foot setback line right here. And so you see the proposed line hits the existing 50-foot line here, and it's for this distance, it's 20 feet, and then the setback widens out again more than 20 feet from the ACEC in this location.
Thank you.
Attorney Clower, if you'd like to address any comments?
I mean, not much to address. I think it's somewhat instructive to look at the subdivision plan. I've put an approximate location where some of the other houses are. The Mandelbaum's house is this house here, located on Lot 6, which is 60 Ostrom Road. The other houses are shown in blue, as well as this is the proposed area that we're discussing here. And that's just for the houses in this particular 6-unit subdivision that came about in 1986. There are a number of other houses along this street that front along the same area. I also, this is a little bit more difficult to see, and it was done this afternoon, which is why I don't have it on the overhead. But what I've shown is I've shown the ACEC setback approximately in relation to the existing GIS map. So you'll see that many of these houses are either encompassed fully or certainly within portions of the ACEC. All this is to say that what we're doing is not I don't believe it's damaging to the environment, period, because we're going to be meeting the other requirements set forth by Conservation Commission and the Rivers Act. And beyond that, it's very much in line with the other development within the area. However, the shape of this lot is such that it is relatively unique certainly to the zoning district as a whole, and even within this specific mini region here, such that the ACEC affects it because of its shape and because it has that 260-foot wide entrance area that cannot be used, obviously for building purposes, that a lessening of that buffer to the ACEC is appropriate and does not have any substantial detriment to the public good.
Board have any follow-up questions? All right, seeing none.
Mr. Hurry, if I may, given the fact that this is a variance and the fact that we don't see many variances before the board, I would only ask that you perhaps keep the matter open during the board discussion so that we can respond if there's questions or concerns.
I don't see a problem with that,
I
thank you.
guess I just have one question, if I could.
Sure.
So prior to the ACEC, there was no, you wouldn't have had to come before the zoning board to build, is that correct?
Prior to the change in the flood zones in 2014, there would have been no need to come in front, I mean, we wouldn't be here in front of the zoning board but for the fact we're requesting a variance from the ACEC. It doesn't require a special permit for construction. So but for the change in 2014 to the flood zones, this would be perfectly buildable. It would be, this is the area that they would have to build, shown here, which would be more than enough for them to build a house of this approximate shape and size. However, due to that change, we are requesting the variance.
Gotcha.
So it would be a completely buildable lot, but for the setback to the ACEC,
All right,
which
thank you.
changed in 2014.
I might have another question.
Sure.
If the variance is granted, then theoretically, the value of the land goes up.
The value of the land remains the same, because it's been taxed as a buildable lot this entire time.
All right,
If the variance is not granted, the value of the land becomes about 10% of its current value.
okay.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, as Attorney Clara suggested, we could keep the hearing open but have some board discussion. Would anyone like to start us off?
Sure, I will. I think that granting a variance for this application is entirely appropriate. I mean, this is gonna be regulated to death anyhow through the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission. But for this overlay that somebody drew in, and at some point drew in, and of course it moves forward because of the changes in the floodplain. I mean, look at the shape of this lot. It looks like a blue heron. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, honest to God. The shape of the lot entitles you to the variance anyways, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm fully in favor of granting it. I could go on and on, but you got my vote.
Anyone else?
So, I mean, sometime in 1985 here, or 1983, I guess, the ACEC was put into this bylaw, and it explicitly says that within the, above described area, there shall be no construction of structures other than accessory buildings. The testimony is that, except for the ACEC, there's no topographic impediment to building there. And so, I mean, I'm sympathetic to the owners, but I'm not sure that the bylaws as written allow us to call this a variance. You know, the variance says, desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good or nullifying or derogating the intent and purpose of this chapter, the bylaws. And ACEC's in there. The intent is clear. So that's the problem I have.
All right. Anyone else like to weigh in?
I'm not a voting member, but I can see the change in the floodplain as being the same thing as a topographic change, although by definition, it may not be, I mean, strictly, but I think from a practical matter, we have to consider it and I agree with previous gentlemen that they should be granted the variance. I mean, as far as the other concerns, before Sri tells me it's none of my business, illegal B&Bs should be reported to the zoning enforcement officer. We'll end that discussion
Well,
at
you
that.
got that in, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I didn't want you to cut me short.
B&Bs are not Airbnb. just
Either
for-
one.
That's the first I heard of anything about that.
That's okay.
Not that it matters.
There's all kinds of conjecture, but we're sticking to the variance. Let's go.
Anything else, Jerry?
No,
All
thank
right.
you.
Bob, do you care to weigh in?
Well, I understand it doesn't seem to be a topography change, and it is a very unique shaped lot, but I guess my hard time is coming with Ken's argument that it's regulatory. As far as the building envelope goes, I'd be a little concerned of what you could expand within that whole envelope, where there's something that's being depicted now right against the buffer line. So I'm kind of middle in the road right now.
I mean, if I could add something, I mean, using the logic that the shape is an issue, you know, you could suggest that for any lot, you know, if you can't meet side yard setback, you can't meet front yard setback, it's the shape of the lot, and they're entitled to a variance. I mean, those are the regulations, they're there for a reason.
I mean, the shape of the lot, though, pushes them as landward as possible, and then otherwise you're into that neck.
No, I mean, it's a difficult situation, I agree with that. I just think that we have a regulation, and then we have a variance procedure, and the variance procedure doesn't allow us to say, just because the regulation's getting in the way, we can ignore it.
I know, but,
That's
this is a
exactly what it
change in the
does.
zoning bylaw.
That's exactly what the variance does. The variance is to vary the regulatory issue.
Yeah, I mean, this was a
So-
change in the bylaw that came about as a result of changes in the floodplain. And, when this was laid out, it was laid out for a single-family setting. And these regulations come in, and because the floodplain moves, the ACEC moves. And the ACEC is an overlay that's placed around Wacoit Bay, I guess, that, it's been identified as an area of environmental critical concern. But, I mean, this cries for relief. This is a building lot.
Well, there might be good reasons why the floodplain, you don't want to build near the floodplain.
But you can build entirely within the floodplain.
And this is entirely outside of the floodplain.
Yeah. I mean,
There's also ways to prevent, to build to certain flood standards, which they don't have to, but.
But this would not, this would not be in the floodplain. And in fact, what I was saying is, if it was entirely in the floodplain, which is objectively a worse situation, the bylaw allows them to build.
yeah.
So it's incongruous, the wording of the bylaw. Mr. Hurry, I don't want to overstep. Do you want me to speak, wait till you have a chance to say comments and then respond, or?
Sure, well, I think we can hear from Ed, and I'll chime in, we can,
Okay,
if you'd like to
I'll hold
add
off for a moment then.
in. Ed, how do you feel on this?
I go for it.
Okay.
I agree with Paul.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with Paul as well. And I know we don't see a variance every day on this board, but I think you meet the criteria. To Ken's point, Attorney Clower, are you aware of any sort of case law or anything regarding a regulatory issue and a variance?
I mean, I think that all variances are regulatory issues. The variance is from a regulation within the bylaw, whether it be a minimum lot size requirement, or whether it be a side yard setback, or a front yard setback that you're granting a variance from, or from a height restriction. Those are all regulatory matters. So I guess I'm struggling to see how the ACEC imposition, which is a local imposition, is any different than perhaps a front yard setback that somebody might be requesting a variance from, or a height limitation. I've been practicing in town for 7 years. I think I've seen 4 variances sought. I think I've seen 2 approved. And one of those was from a height limitation. It allowed the building to go to 42 feet instead of 35 feet, and that was because of the unique characteristics of the lot. Mr. Foreman had been concerned with the topography of the lot, but topography is only one of 3 factors that qualifies for a variance. Soil conditions and shape are the other 2. And I'll let Tom speak to this, but I think there is actually a change in the topography because the FEMA regulations change the datum by which elevation is measured. So elevation, which was previously elevation 11, is now elevation 12.2. That was part of what was changed under the flood zone changes. So there is a change, and so when the flood zone elevations changed, the actual elevation lines on the ground, the topographical lines on the ground changed as well. The ACEC was in effect when these lots were created in 1986, but the difference is in 1986, this was a buildable lot because of the designation of the ACEC line. In 2014, that ACEC line changed, and this lot essentially lost its buildability because you cannot meet the required side yard, well, you can't meet the setbacks as well as septic setbacks within the space that's left. So this is a situation which I think Mr. Murphy hit the nail on the head, begs for relief and allows the board to vary the regulations. So it is a regulatory matter, but all variances are regulatory matters. Did you want to?
I could speak briefly. We didn't show all the topography on this because there's so many lines already, but I would say that the flood zone is defined by the topography. The ACEC is defined by the topography. If this lot had been steeper, more topography, the flood zone would not have gone so far onto the property. If it had been flatter, the flood zone could have occupied the entire property, and then we would have had the other relief. So I think this situation is very connected to the topography because it's the topography that determines where the extent of the flood zone and the ACEC is on the property.
I mean, I would hate to see this thing go into litigation if this weren't granted tonight. That would be unbelievable. I think that, I strongly feel we have all the criteria necessary to grant this variance with a straight face, because most aren't granted with straight faces. This is a textbook case for a variance. It ought to be granted. These people ought to be able to build their house. They've owned it for 25 years. To deny this and send them to court would be unbelievable. I'm fully in favor of granting this, as you know. So I just wanted to restate that.
Thank you.
Sounds like you might be crafting the findings and conditions, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, this plan is a mess. It's just looking at it gives me a headache. Imagine owning it and going through this.
Yes, question? What is the math? 3-2 is a denial?
Correct.
So, question is, do you poll people, or you give them an opportunity to withdraw and come back?
Well, I'd just like,
They haven't closed the hearing, so.
I know, that's,
I'd like, if Mr. Foreman and Mr. Dugan have any other comments or thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them. And if we haven't swayed you in either direction, I'd like to know that too, because, we need to make a determination internally as to how we proceed, because we don't want to go to litigation, but the alternative is losing the entirety of the value of the lot.
Well, if we could hear from those board members. Bob, you were on the fence.
With
How do you feel?
Mr. Bunker's explanation on relating the topography to the flood zone, I'd be more inclined to be in favor of the variance.
And
I
Ken?
still have trouble voting for it, but I am sympathetic. I understand that. I just feel like you could, using this argument, you could make a case for a variance on almost every situation that comes before us. That there's some issue with the lot that, so they can't conform to the regulations.
Okay, moving on.
Okay,
I'm not gonna say anything else.
Okay,
so we've pretty much gotten a straw poll of the board. How would the board like to proceed?
I'm happy to make a motion to close.
Okay.
Second.
Motion to close by Ken and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
And how would the board like to proceed?
I'd like to make a motion to grant the variance as proposed, I guess. I mean, he's here because he's in the ACEC, but however you want to word that, but I'm in favor of
right.
granting the requested relief.
Second.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, second by Bob. And Suri, we haven't done a variance since I've been a chairman. Do we do normal findings and conditions, or how is this?
You do findings, if you want to do a condition to limit them to the building envelope that is shown there. Because again, you don't condition the house that's shown, but you can condition that building envelope.
Paul, your motion, would you like to kick us off with findings?
Sure. I'd like to make a finding that the lot shape is very unique and non-traditional.
All right.
And,
Can I make a suggestion?
no,
Why not?
you're not a voting member.
I know, but I can speak, and they can listen,
The discussion's over, they're doing the
Well, I'll ask
findings
the chair.
for it.
if I could offer something
Briefly.
briefly.
Yep.
I'd like to have someone reiterate what Engineer Bunker mentioned about change in topography is, in fact, related to the floodplain change. That was testimony from,
Would you like that as part of the findings? Is that,
well, I can't make that as part of the findings because I'm not a voting member, but
what you're suggesting?
I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what, I'll adopt that analysis.
Can you
and
rephrase it, please? Because I'm not
Well-
quite certain I understand.
I think,
So the
Plain
finding
change.
that Engineer Bunker gave at the end, that the topography
Due to
now versus what it was due to the change in the FEMA has rendered this also,
yeah,
the hearing's closed, guys.
the topography is such that the change in the floodplain pushed the property entirely within the ACEC, just about, and so I would say the flood zone relates to topography. I don't know, we can work on that.
No, I think that's the right way to say
Oh,
it.
okay, all right.
The buffer proposed is 20 feet. Current owners have owned the property for 26 years. Previous to this, it was a buildable lot.
Those are good findings.
Literal interpretation of the bylaw would render it unbuildable.
Also, I think we should find that there is a footprint for a proposed house on the plan that is within a area that's 5,000 square feet designated as the area that might be disturbed.
It's a good finding.
The footprint of a dwelling is within the,
5,000, yeah, and the footprint itself
right, it's in the 5,000
is
square foot
2,042.2 feet.
conditioned by the River Act, right?
And thank you for helping with that finding, because I think I know which way you're voting on this, so.
So that's based on the River Act, the 5,000 square
Yeah.
foot.
Yes.
Any other,
And I guess there was testimony that there would be protection under the Rivers Act and Conservation Commission for the site.
Any other findings?
Held to other regulatory boards as well.
Any conditions?
I'd love to see us include a condition that limits the house to the footprint on the plan as proposed. Equivalent size.
Substantially the same, is that okay?
Yes,
'Cause that
equivalent
gives and takes a
size.
little,
Right.
substantially same footprint.
I think that's appropriate, given the concerns of the project.
For the condition, the building envelope is shown?
No, we just stated that it'll be substantially the same footprint as proposed on the plan,
Yeah, that's fine.
Anything else?
but you don't want to hold them directly to that. Okay, you want to call the motion?
All right, the motion to approve the variance was made by Paul, second by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
One.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, and up next, we have application 66-18, Rogers, 689 Gifford Street in East Falmouth.
Good evening, my name is Jerry Rogers.
I'm sorry, if we need to read everything into the record first.
I'm
and then,
sorry, go right
Bobby,
ahead.
proceed.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Jerry E. Rogers of Rochester, Mass. applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a modification of special permit number 5707 and the use variance pursuant to Sections 240-3, 240-204B, and 240-72.3, paragraph 8 of the Code of Falmouth to eliminate the budget vehicle rental operation and in its place construct an additional storage garage on subject property known as 689 Gifford Street, Falmouth, Mass. Correspondence from the fire department, whereas the building is over 7,500 square feet, it will be required to have a fire sprinkler system installed along with fire alarm system, monitored central station, and all of the things going with it. And that's all the comments.
There's no correspondence outside of that between me and the town engineers and Mr. Rogers.
And just so everyone's aware, I believe the presentation tonight is just to present the project to the zoning board tonight. I don't believe any action will be taken on it because it is under planning board review at the time. Right now, we will need the planning board to make their decision before we can proceed on this project. So with that having been said, for the applicant?
Okay. So, what I'm being told
I
right,
apologize. Mr. Chairman, could you designate an associate to sit on this, please?
This will be Jerry.
What is it?
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Jerry Rogers. I own the property at 689 Gifford Street, and I operate the business that's there, the Falmouth Climate Control Self-Storage. What we are proposing is a 4,900 square foot footprint building that would take up the property that is now paved and was designated for parking for the budget trucks that we rent. The lot coverage is at its limit with that pavement there. So by alleviating that section and putting the building there, we stay within our lot coverage. We're doing this because, first of all, the budget truck rental business is, on my end, financially not what it should be. But it also creates a bit of a hazard for traffic and, trucks leak, they bleed, different kinds of things. So by alleviating that and creating this building, it's a safer environment. It's cleaner, it's neater. The building will be consisted of exactly what you see there now. It'll be the same color, it will be the same height. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the operation, but we like to think that we run a neat ship. You can see from the paperwork that was submitted where we plan on putting it. I am in the process of addressing the planning board's desires or decision, and also the fire department. I'm dealing with Mel on that. As far as the restrictions or the, as far as what the provisions are as to the BDA system and the wet system for the fire suppression and so forth, that is all in existence in the other building, and, we will naturally just follow suit with this other building. So I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. It's a pretty straightforward thing.
Jerry, any questions?
No questions.
Ed?
No questions. You won't even be able to see the building from the street, I don't think.
Correct. Ken, any questions?
Can you, there's this 40-foot long, 10-foot wide area designated in the pavement that's only 21 feet from the edge.
That's your loading dock.
It's a loading dock, but there's also, it's less than 21 feet if you consider the parking.
I've addressed that with Mel. He had some concerns about getting the ladder truck through he asked me to do have an engineer do a radius that he would show on paper. And to alleviate the problem, I am going to remove, if the permit is granted, I'm going to remove the loading dock.
You're going to remove that?
Yes,
Okay, well then that does away with the issue altogether.
it does.
Okay. It's the only thing I noticed.
Paul?
I have no questions.
Bob?
No questions.
When are you anticipating a decision by the planning board?
It's October 9th is the next time they're meeting. We are waiting on drainage calculations. Basically, what we're doing with the water that's coming off the roof of the building, when in fact, we're going to do the same thing with it that we're doing with it now. We're not really changing anything in that regard. But, I find it a little redundant, but it's required, so following suit. They told me that they should be done in a week or so.
Okay.
So hopefully if I get those over to the planning board, they will move forward with this. There's been a little confusion, I guess, regarding, some of the engineering and so forth and drawings and what the engineer was looking at and what actually was, there were 3 special permits because of the nature of the property. And when I purchased it, it was, everything there was under a special permit. So everything that's done has to be agreed upon by the Board of Appeals.
I see.
So we've gone through 3 special permits, and I don't believe that the engineer received the proper documentation.
I
Town
understand.
engineer.
Yeah, the town engineer, I'm sorry.
I'll remind the board that years ago, this was a salvage yard and the budget rental place. So the salvage yard was totally removed. There was a 21E done,
Yes.
and Mr. Rogers built the existing Falmouth storage unit there that is totally inside. So it's unlike the other storage companies that are in town. And the board conditioned budget, Hertz, and the storage. And so far, the only issues that were ever done, I have contacted Jerry, and he's cleared them up within 24 hours, and it had to do with the budget trucks.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Sari, do you have any questions?
Nope.
All right, seeing none. Any members of the public, any comments, questions, concerns regarding this project? Yes, sir.
I think it's a great project.
Oh, if you'd like to come up to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Paul Miskovsky.
I'm Paul Moskowski. I run a business not too far from Jerry, and I had to use that facility at one point, and it's totally organized, and what he's talking about is, will fit very nicely on the property. And there won't be any visual effect from the street, what he's gonna do, so I think it's a good project. And we
Thank you.
certainly need it.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name is David Pires. I live right to the north end of 701 Gibbon Street, 100%. I don't mind getting rid of the budget trucks either. That's not a bad thing, but I agree with that 100%. He does a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
John Netto.
John Nettle, 450 Brook Hill Road. I know Jerry for about 30 years, and he runs a good, clean operation. About 8 years ago, the town got in trouble with the FEMA and the disaster. They had no place to put this stuff. So Fire Chief Sullivan called me up. He said, "John, we got a problem." And so I talked to Jerry. He opened up the place, put everything there for about a year and a half. Nobody else in town came and helped us. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Turn that down, please, Jerry. Turn it to 2 or 1. We're getting a lot of feedback. There's the door right there on your way, too. So I'm looking for a date for a continuation. I'd like to be able, hopefully they'll be done on the 9th. So I'd like to continue this to the 18th so I can work on this decision before 50 days.
Sure.
I would move that we continue this hearing until October 18th.
I'll second.
Here in Town Hall at 6:30.
Okay,
Still second.
that was made by Ken, second by Jerry. All those in favor? Aye.
Excuse me, October 18th is okay with you, right? I think I discussed that, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's the one with that fancy car.
Okay, enjoy. So, Mr. Chairman, with
I
that
was just about
board
to
member
say,
leaving, all 5 of you will be voting members now?
Record will reflect that Member Murphy had to exit, leaving us with 5 members. And next on the agenda, we have application 68-18, Brundret, 27 Sunfish Lane in East Falmouth.
Being all persons,
Excuse me, no, we have George Hufelder. The second one is George Hufelder. What are you looking at?
This guy. All right, oh, my apologies. You have that one, yes?
yeah, 67?
Yep. My apologies, we have application 67-18, Hufelder, 78 Oakwood Avenue in Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that George Hochfelder of Falmouth, Mass. applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-3C, 240-69E, and 240-23I of the Code of Falmouth to allow a detached accessory apartment, increasing lot coverage by structures over 20% on the subject property known as 78 Oakwood Avenue, Falmouth, Mass. And referrals from the town. Standard comments about dry wells and runoff to the road. From the planning board, the applicant filed a site plan review application with the planning board scheduled for 9/11/18 agenda. The Water Department, for water regulations, all occupied structures shall have their own water service applicant will have to be submitted and approved for water service line installation as well as access to installed water meter. And Board of Health current accessory bylaw 3F requires that an IAA technology be installed when density exceeds 10,
Excuse me.
one bedroom per 10,000 square feet of lot space would not be required if proposed bylaw language changed or are approved. That's it.
Okay.
I'll remind the board that Mr. Hufelder is still in front of the planning board under the design review and site plan review. So this, again, is a presentation for the board and any concerns or questions that might be raised that he can answer for this board before the continuation. Thank you.
Okay, and for the applicant?
Thank you. My name's George Heufelder, and my wife and I occupy and own the building and the project before you at 78 Oakwood Avenue. We've lived there for 35 years, raised 3 children, and like herring that come back to spawn, one of them came back to the stream they were spawned in, but they had family in tow, so my desire is to build an accessory apartment in back. My wife and I might, don't like the expression age in place, so I'll say continue our journey. There's one slight change in the plan, which I had overlooked before I submitted it. We're not asking for any increased lot coverage. There's a 20% lot coverage presently, and I have the red stamp plan in my possession. I'll leave it with the board this evening. So, project in summary is that we have a bunch of sheds in back and a deck, which we're about proposed to remove and place a 24 by 34 building back then, a single family, a single bedroom, 800 square, well, actually 700 and change square foot interior space. We've had Holmes and McGrath do the plot plan. This is a rendering of that plot plan, which is pretty much to scale. I've outlined an area where the approximate area of the septic system is, and I feel fairly qualified to be able to say that, since I designed septic systems and have done enough for municipalities in that regard. So this is the plot plan that I have the copy of. It shows this 20% lot coverage and pretty much all the basic features which are right there. So in front of the planning board, there were some objections raised. The first one, which was already mentioned, they objected to the architectural style, and it was not in harmony with the neighborhood. I've learned a whole lot about harmony in neighborhoods lately, and about the character of neighborhoods, and I found out that my neighborhood has a lot of character. But not being an architect myself, I sort of went around to some of the buildings and tried to address the concern that might be there. The second concern was the dimensions outside exceed 800 square feet, but the internal space is about 770, and I guess I will go back and remind the board of their regulation, which allows in excess of 800 square feet, but as long as the internal space, living space, is 770. The abutters had some objection to possible intrusion by headlights, and I'll show you how I've addressed those. There was a voice concern about an added electrical pole, but I would assume that I would bring all the utilities back underground. There was voices objection to the accessory apartment at all. The three of my direct abutters have said everything's fine, but there is a direct abutter behind me who is concerned about the presence of an accessory apartment at all. And I think during the hearing, what we heard was most people don't understand that the one of the two have to be owner occupied. These will be occupied, of course, by my wife and I, and our young family with 6 people will occupy the main house. There was one letter submitted in objection to that simply because of the presence of an accessory apartment, and the next door abutter to me submitted one in favor, and they both entered into the record. So I've changed the architectural style. The bylaw seems to indicate the internal space is within the regulation. Proposed is some extension of fencing, which I'll show you, to guard against the headlights. We will likely bring all the utilities back underground, and the board had to reiterate the purpose of the bylaw, which my wife and I really appreciate the fact that the town is allowing something like this, because, boy, it hit us right in the pocket there. It was like, well, a young family moving back, they can't afford a house. We have a house, and probably a little bit too big, but we love the neighborhood, and we want to stay there and, again, continue our journey. So a review of some of the neighborhood structures. These are some of the structures. This is what I see right out my front door, and I don't want to misrepresent it because the gentleman's sort of repairing the roof on it and sort of getting it in shape for a wood shop or something inside. This is also a direct, straight across the street from me. This is a 2-story. If you see in the upper left-hand corner, that's the full shot of it. I don't know really what the building is used for, but it is an accessory building to the main house, which you can see right in front of it. This is my direct abutter to the west, and a building that he uses for a wood shop. This is another building to the west that can be seen from the front of my house. Again, I think it's a wood shop, but I don't pry into people's business. Another accessory building and nursery. So looking at all of those, there was a design that we had come up with, one more, right on 2 doors down from me. Looking at all of these, we tried to come up with a rendering, because until I get permission, I'm not going to work with an architect, but a simple rendering of the building that we might apply for. This is the front of the house. This is the backyard, which those sheds will all be removed, demolished, or removed off the property. And this was the initial design we presented before the planning board. And I'm not exactly sure, I can't really repeat everything they said at the hearing, and I couldn't get the televised version to sit down and sort of encapsulate it, but Suffice to say, they did not like that. So the newest design is one with a roof line that's a lot flatter, a shorter building. That other one was 17. This is 15 and 1. The floor plan pretty much is the same. 1 bedroom, 1 large living area, a bathroom, and a closet. And access to an unfinished basement only from the outside. So that's it's very difficult to see because my skill at CAD only is not in Photoshop, but that's basically what the outline of the building would look like against the existing sheds. That shed for scale is about 12 feet by 8 feet deep. The other shed is 8 by 8. It's actually a chicken coop. I have a small 3-hen little flock out back. And this is about what you would see of that building from the street, which I believe would sort of blend right in visually and look like I have something hanging off the back of my house, because that's about all the building you would see. The abutters in the rear have expressed concern that since we're pulling up, the parking will be beside the accessory apartment, that I'll have headlights. There's already a fence back there, a stockade fence, as you can see. We won't continue that. I'll put a stockade fence inside my property line because you might notice there's a very nice tree right in the corner. I think it's, in the old days, they used to put one of these trees with many things just to mark the corner boundary. I don't want to disturb that tree. I don't even know who exactly would own the majority of it. And then running down the side, there's a chain link fence right now, and I would put sections of stockade fence to keep the abutter, which is sort of over there behind those leaves and not quite behind me, who was concerned about headlights. I did mention sort of half jokingly that I'd have to be quite inebriated to hit that with headlights, but either way, I would put the stockade fence along that side. There's already a chain link fence there. I get along with the neighbor on that side very well. He just have to put up with the a stockade fence inside of his chain link fence. Actually, it's our chain link fence. So there's the accessory apartment. That's pretty much what we're looking for, is 1 bedroom, kitchen, living room area, and a bath. The floor plan is the exact same plan that was of the one that we brought before Planning Board. They didn't have any objection to the floor plan. Their objection was to the outside architecture of the building. They suggested that I go to an architect, which again, until I'm sure I can put something back there, I gave more of the rendering that you saw on the previous slides. So that's pretty much it. It's my story. It's the only one I have. And I'm open to any questions.
I will let the board know that I did review the planning board meeting, and they are asking Mr. Hoyfelter to meet the new discussed regulation of 800 square feet footprint, but that is not the bylaw as yet, and we don't know if it's going to be approved at town meeting or not. And what this board has to look at is the bylaw that's in place. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Sari. Bob, do you have any questions?
I just have a procedural question for the administrator. If this has already been applied for now, and if changes do go through after town meeting, do the new changes, if voted for, have to apply to the application?
I've got to that's a good question, because I've got to see when the publication, because remember, there's a thing with the town meeting, that's right. I stand corrected. If he applied before the notice of public hearing from the planning board, then he goes by the old one. If he applied after the notice of public hearing for the article in that town meeting, then he's held to that article. That's right. Thank you.
Okay. This, during the planning board meeting, I had assumed that the planning board knew what their own regulation was, although my understanding was slightly different. I stated that, and I'm pretty clear on this, taking 1 foot off the length of that building would exactly meet their regulation. It would be, of course, we would do it. It would reduce the setbacks a little bit. I mean, it would actually leave more setback on the side, so it would not put us in any worse compliance. It would take away some of the setback.
All right, so that's in the
15
event of
Yeah, we're
the date.
15 feet pretty much all around except on that west side. We're 14 and 13. So we'd go 12 and 13.
So I don't know what the date of that notice of public hearing in front of the planning board is, but I will check and inform everybody what that is. Okay?
Any other questions?
So, Mr. Felter, on the basement itself, it's just a bulkhead access, there's no interior access?
Yes, we don't plan on any interior access. It's just mainly, if you notice those 3 sheds there, they have equipment and some things in them. I just put those down there. They're really nothing we go into. The laundry is within the living space, so there's no reason to put an interior access to it. It's only got the utilities down there.
That's all I have to know.
Ken?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, whether this applies to detached, the limitation on percent of the principal structure, is that,
Less than 40% or less.
okay.
Yes.
Is
The
that-
calculation was submitted, it's
Okay.
roughly 37%.
Okay, thank you, that was it.
Ed?
No, I don't have any question.
Jerry, any questions?
2, I'm assuming the planning board will address whether the front of the building looks like a garage or a barn.
That I can't speak for them.
They didn't at their,
I
when I
really
reviewed the
can't.
hearing, they didn't.
I mean, that's been a concern of this board.
What they asked him to do is just, they couldn't understand why he had that second level of windows, and they asked him to change the roof line design. They did not suggest putting in garage doors like they did with another applicant.
Well, I think that was my point.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether this board would want to have a discussion of that, or would just wait and see when it comes back in front of us.
What he's proposing to the planning board is what you see with the
Okay,
new
so-
roof line. And that's
It was,
basically what they suggested as well.
Yes, right.
Oh, that's interesting. The other thing is, depending on what's passed at town meeting, you may or may not have to put a advanced nitrogen system in.
Well, I did notice that the new maps do not place me in an area where there's an impacted watershed.
So you're not in a coastal overlay.
It is in the present coastal pond overlay district. However, the new maps, it looks like the particular pond we are in the watershed of is not impacted and not on the maps as critical.
Okay, so it would be a standard Title V system.
Well, yes, but I will tell you they will probably do, with permits, by the way, some experimenting with
Of course.
nitrogen removal
Thank you.
components. It's only because it's what I do. I have no other life. This is what I do.
I have no other question.
When are you anticipating, I should ask, do you have a next date with the planning board?
Yes, it is the first one in October, there, October 9th, I believe.
Any other questions from the board? Sari, do you have any questions?
No,
All right. Any
We've
members of
talked
the
a lot.
public? Questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? All right, seeing none.
Move to continue?
No,
No?
why do we continue? Are we continuing?
It's still in front of the planning board.
All right.
So I have a question for the board. If he is before the planning board on the 9th, I wonder if they'll render a decision that we can have him briefly on October 11th? Or is that too soon, do you think? They usually give a decision.
See, I don't know how the planning board works. I do
Well,
know
Mr.
other
Foreman
boards.
does.
I don't know how the current planning board
I don't with the
worked very
new.
well when I was on it.
Oh, well.
Would the 18th be better for him?
I'm really packed on the 18th.
Oh, okay.
I don't see any harm with the 11th. If they need to change the date, they can.
Yeah, if we have to, then we'll continue it to the 18th. and make it at 5. No, I'm kidding. So if the board would continue this to the 11th, if we could do it at 6, it will just be you as voting members, so.
Yep.
Ken?
Everyone make it here at 6?
I don't have you out on the 11th.
I know, but getting here at 6 is not always so easy, but,
6:15?
all right, 6:15. Thank you.
Make a motion to continue to October 11th at
Ken,
6:15,
Would you like
please.
to make
I
a
would like to
motion
make
for
a motion that
6:15?
we continue this application until October 11th, here in Town Hall at 6:15.
I'll second.
All right, motion was made by Ken, and was seconded by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
luck.
very
Thank you,
much.
George. May we have a little,
Yes.
Sure, we'll be taking a 5-minute break.
thank you.
Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws. You are hereby notified that Peter J. and Ann M. Bundret of Walpole, Mass. Applied for a zoning board of appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-68D and 243C of the Code of Falmouth to raise and reconstruct pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling on subject property known as 27 Sunfish Lane, East Falmouth. Board of Health, new three-bedroom septic system proposed, property on Zone 2 with 45,000 square feet, and have 3 bedrooms without enhanced nitrogen renewal. Proposed septic design does appear to meet Title V from the Board of Health. Engineering, same comments about right-of-ways and the from the Water Department, property is not served by town water. And that's it.
Okay, and for the applicant?
Thank you. For the record, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design, representing the Brundrets with this special permit application. Sunfish Lane. Start off, I'll show you focus here, aerial photograph from the town GIS of Crooked Pond. Up on the north side, this highlighted outline is the lot in question. This is the existing house in the middle of the lot, well, sort of the middle of the lot, except right against the shore. That's why we're here. And Sunfish Lane is to the west of this property, and Thomas B. Landers Road is just off the page to the south in there. I have this is the existing house on here, a little one-story house, about 626 square feet footprint. Covers 1.37% of the lot, built in 1920 from the town records, so it's only 15 feet from Crooked Pond, where the zoning requires 50 feet, and otherwise conforms to other setbacks from the road, from other lot lines. And we don't know exactly where the septic system is, but because of the area, presuming that the septic system is somewhere within the developed area, which would put it less than 100 feet from the pond. This is the proposed plan, but I think you have the existing conditions plan. Basically, this lighter brown area is the existing house right here, and a little bit of deck facing the pond. It is 15 feet. It's 15 feet. It's on one of the plans. It's labeled as 15 feet from the pond to this corner of the deck right here. And as I said, this is 1.37% of the lot area, the existing. The entire house is within the 50 feet from the pond, and this darker gray, brown area is the proposed addition, and some of this proposed addition is also within 50 feet of the pond. If the addition had been more than 50 feet from the pond, then it wouldn't need a special permit. I make a point that it was advertised both here and a Conservation Commission that the house is to be raised, but that's not totally the case. The existing foundation and the existing cellar will stay. There's not a total demolition of the house. There was some of that cellar, hot tub, and other fixtures down there that they wanted to keep. As noted on the plan, the foundation will be built up 1 foot higher. And so the new addition of the house where it comes away from the pond, it will all be built up 1 foot higher to get proper clearance above the ground for drainage. They're adding 1,114 square feet. Total will be 1,740 square feet of footprint, which covers 4.2% of the lot, which is still within what the allowance. That includes this dark brown area here where there's 128 square feet of deck, but this deck is not coming closer to the pond, so this setback of 15 feet to the pond edge will remain, and there'll be no nonconformity, there'll be no new nonconformities, and the existing nonconformity will not be made more nonconforming. The house will have 3 bedrooms, as noted, and there's an area on the lot. We have the pond and a wetland bordering the pond. This line with the A in it is 100 feet from the pond. That's the Conservation Commission A zone, Zone A. And at the very south end of the lot, there is another wetland, and 100 feet from that wetland. So there is an area in between the two lines where this septic system will fit. It's a 3-bedroom septic system. It's more than 100 feet from any wetland, and it's has enough clearance to groundwater to meet all Title V and local Board of Health regulations. Show you a photo of the house, the existing floor plans. Basically a kitchen, family room, bedroom, and a bath with the deck there. And so the point out the elevation at the bottom right of the plan, that's the elevation that's facing the pond, and there's that deck, and it has a walkout level from the basement. And you see it's a 1-story house. The, nope, not that one. So this is the proposed, no, this is the proposed elevation. Looks, I was confused because it looks very much the same, but that's the point. It's still a 1-story house. As you can see, it's, I forgot to mention the height of the existing is 12.5 feet. This plan has got a little taller, it's 17.5 feet. And that's because you see on this photo of the house has a very shallow roof. And so the proper pitch for the roof makes it a little taller. On this elevation at the bottom of the page, you see the deck facing the pond. And I'll point that out because, and here's the view from the pond. Very similar to the, a little more detail, but similar to the view from the pond. And I'll point that out because if you look at this aerial photo, this house is not visible from any other house. And this gets to whether it's views or vistas from any public way or anything like that. It's only visible from the pond if someone out in the boat. And so I can say that this architecturally, the only view that's available to the public will be very similar to what's there now. It will not cast shadows onto any abutting property, as it's only visible from Crooked Pond. It's very similar to the existing house. The site in general is adequate in terms of its size. It's been used as a single-family house lot since 1920. It's certainly suitable for this use. It's zoned agricultural, but residential is one of the allowed uses in it. It's architecturally consistent with its former self. And some of the other houses in the neighborhood, although I say this is much better than some of the other houses if you went down on Sunfish Lane and saw, I don't have a picture of it, but some of the other structures there need help. And I would like to, I talked to Scott And he mentioned in the referral from Health that it's in a Zone 2, and I just would like to make a correction. I talked to him, and he said he would call in or something, saying it's actually, he agrees that it's not in a Zone 2. He put that on because he saw the mention of Zone 2 in our notes. If you look on our notes on this plan, Note 3, locus is not within Zone 2. The pond is Zone 2, the land is not, so just didn't want that coming in as a finding that this property is in a Zone 2. Although as having a private water supply well on it, it's still a nitrogen-sensitive area, so we are limited to 4 bedrooms, and we only have 3. That is the proposal, and I'll take any questions.
Bob, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, Tom, where is the current access to the property?
Current access is coming in off of, I don't know if it's on the aerial photo, comes across from Jagat Road, this dirt way in front of house number 30, I guess that's 30 Jagat Road. It comes across there now.
So
But-
so you're proposing the new access off of Sunfish?
Yes.
What, and you show on that Sunfish private portion a leaching chamber?
That's drainage for the driveway.
So that drainage is not on this actual lot?
That is not, but it's you know, drainage is it's a standard use for a way. It's it's a private way. They have rights over that private way, so they can do some improvements to meet. This was for mainly conservation requirements.
Okay, so they have rights over that even though that portion doesn't exist yet? Because the road, when I went down there, the road goes to the left?
Yeah.
And there's no access through the woods, so they would just be making a,
If you went through there where my guy cut out a path, that actually was the dirt road that they're using now came in from Jagat Road in front of the house, and if you went up that path, you'd go by the cement mixer, but
so is there any reason they wouldn't keep accessing from Jagat?
They don't have it.
they, let's say that with this project, they've agreed to not come in that way. They wouldn't be allowed to cross in front of that from Jagat Road anymore.
Is there anything that would deny them from putting that leaching structure on the Sunfish portion?
That's still up the slope. I put that structure on the low part of the driveway, so
But as far as whatever the controlling aspects of that Sunfish lot, there wouldn't be an issue?
excuse me?
There wouldn't be an issue, whoever can, on the control of that lot, to actually put that structure on it,
I
correct?
don't believe so. They have rights. They had an attorney working on it, and as far as I know, they have rights to use Sunfish Lane. It has an address of Sunfish Lane.
Yeah, my question was just actually putting the structure on it versus,
It's not a structure.
Well, it's-
And what did the referral from engineering, did engineering make a comment on that?
This application was reviewed only for impacts on public rights of way. This lane is a private right of way, this area, any connections are the standard comment. No stormwater on the public property, abutters are right of ways. Dry wells proposed for the roof. Any comment?
Thank you.
I could point out that that leaching structure could possibly move a little bit closer to the uphill. It wouldn't be as effective, but also it cannot be within 25 feet of the septic system by Title V regulations. So the best location is to put it down there.
that's all I have.
Ken?
I don't have any questions on this one.
No.
Jerry?
This isn't a coastal overlay zone? Nope.
It
thought it was.
is in the, yes, Coastal Pond Overlay District, Great Pond, and Great Seporsett Marsh.
And it doesn't need an advanced nitrogen system.
Not, no, not
Board of
by
Health
right,
does?
no.
I noticed the lot coverage is extremely low. What's the size of the actual lot?
It's 45,700 total, 43,300 upland.
Decent size. Any other questions from the board? Sari, any questions?
No, just a clarification that what Bob brought up, there is no easement to cross the other path. It's just been a friendly way. And since they're reconstructing, and that's what the application does say, raise and reconstruct, they've agreed to open up on Sunfish. And if you have any questions, Attorney Nickerson is here to ask. But it's my understanding, talking with the abutter, that there is no formal easement, and the applicant is amenable to opening up on Sunfish Way. Or Sunfish Lane, excuse me.
Okay. There's no more board questions. We can turn it to the public. Any questions, comments, concerns from members of the public? Seeing none, back to the board. How would the board like to proceed?
I can move to close.
I'll second.
Motion to close was made by Ken, second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And what would be the board's pleasure?
I'll move to grant application 6818 to raise and reconstruct.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
The findings would be that this is, there's no increase in the nonconformity, that the lot coverage is far below the regulatory limit at 4% by
4.2.
structures. The building height is only modestly increasing from 12 and a half to 17, I guess. 6 says 18 feet 10, is that correct? Or is that might be from in the walkout area.
From the front, where the average grade is, it's 17 and a half.
Okay, it's 17 and a half. There is an
Increase in bedroom.
increase in bedrooms, right?
Mm-hmm,
Yes.
2, 3,
3 beds.
and
It's on private well?
Yes.
there's also, I guess, another finding would be that they're changing their access. To Sunfish Lane, where they apparently have actual frontage, right?
Mhm.
That, So that's an improvement in terms of meeting regulations.
Septic system upgrade.
Okay. And then conditions,
So worth noting that they're keeping the existing foundation.
yeah,
It's not exactly a raise and reconstruct, but
keeping a portion of the foundation near the pond, yes.
And that 15-foot, you did mention no increase in nonconformities.
Yep.
15-foot is from the deck.
Mhm. So I guess the conditions would be as per plan and no more than 3 bedrooms.
And to utilize the Sunfish access
Lane.
prior to, so that heavy equipment isn't going across that private land.
Sure. So construction via
From Sun's,
Sunfish.
right. Okay.
Lane. That's it. that I can
Alright.
think of.
That's all I can think of as well. Anyone else? All right, that motion was to approve was made by Ken and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Silent Jeff. I thought, but you're good, Tim, on this one too.
Thank you.
So you weren't you on this one as well? Obviously, a letter from the attorney. Good thing you didn't get up and speak, huh? Okay.
Good thing I didn't need help.
I Yeah, I do.
And up next, we have application 69-18, Garvey, 450 Grand Ave, Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Richard Garvey of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 243C, 240-68A, and B, and 240-69 of the Code of Falmouth to raise and reconstruct the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling on subject property known as 450 Grand Avenue, Falmouth, Mass. Well, the proposed project doesn't appear to be an increase in bedroom number in the proposed septic plan. It's a 3-bedroom. However, Board of Health will need to be, variance need to be sought for these numerous Title V nonconformities, 6 total. Engineering, standard comments. That's it.
Okay, for the applicant?
Thank you. For the applicant, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design. And here with me tonight is Jeff Nicholson. Also for the applicant.
My bad.
So this lot is a little different from the previous one. We have, let me get this. The lot was built, or the house, I should say, the lot was created in 1871 on Plan Book 25, page 67. This lot with a yellow dot on it, it's 450 Grand Ave, and it's in a cluster of all these small lots as the heights are, and then behind it is Deacons Ave, and then Deacons Pond is behind that. There's 3,050 square feet total. There was actually, there's a later plan, 1958, where they had the original lot, and they added 1 foot to the side of it. So they got 1 foot bigger, now they're 51 feet wide, rather than the 50 feet that was on there before. And there's an aerial photo with the lot outlined. This house right here, there's the Thomas Chapel next door. It's on probably 4 lots, I guess. The chapel is next to it. There's another house that's probably on 4 lots. And then they have this cluster of our lot and 3 others that are on the original lots. And then further to the north, and you have a large building, a large parking lot. So that's a was that a condominium there? Over there. So that's the property. So the existing house is like this, with a roof deck on top. Stairs on the one on the right is the rear view of it, the stairs going up to the roof deck. Deck at grade in the rear, and the front, there's a stoop in the front, and this one-story house, like we show here. The house is in the flood zone. It is their existing site plan here. The flood zone AE elevation 13. The floor elevation is 11.6, so it's 1.4 feet below the flood zone. There's a bulkhead over on the right-hand side of it. That means there's a little cellar beneath there, which is not allowed by flood zone standards, construction in the flood zone. So it's non-conforming to FEMA standards. On the left-hand side, the house is 3.9 feet. On the right-hand side, to these masonry steps, is 2.1 feet to the property line, and this bulkhead door is 3.3 feet to the property line. And the main body of the house is, it's a little bit of an angle, but it's 7.5 feet at the back right corner and 8 feet at the front right corner. This house is 1,385 square feet and covers 45.4% of the lot. And it is 14.8 feet high to the roof peak, and there's a deck railing on the roof deck. There's another 2.9 feet above the roof peak elevation, so the total height is 17.7. Show you the
I'm sorry, you said that lot coverage, total lot coverage
Existing.
was, existing.
existing
Yeah, because you're, right, okay,
45.4
right.
by structures. So we have the plans for the new house. This is the first floor plan. Living room, dining room, whatever, bedrooms upstairs, and then there's still a roof deck on it. You can see there's a deck at the second floor level, and then a spiral stair going up to the roof deck, which is comparable to the roof deck they have now. There's just a crawl space, not a basement here. That will be the slab at grade with flood vents as shown to meet all the flood zone building code requirements. And this is an elevation of the house where you can see at the bottom of it, all that skirting. That's 3 feet that it has to be raised to get out above the flood zone. And then there's the one-story house, and then one story above that, or a half a story above that. And then, spiral staircase going up to the deck. And in this case, the deck is, the deck and the railing are below the roof peak, whereas in the other house, the railing was above the roof peak. And then there's the wood trellis above that. And I can point out on this elevation, I had noted this one, there was a question from Sari because it says above finish grade. And then as I was looking at this, I realized there's actually a math error in it. If you add up these elevations, starting at the floor elevation 14.5, the elevation comes to 44, but the floor elevation comes to 44, so you had a 1-foot error in the math there, but the 34.6 is correct, except he says finished grade, I added it up, working above my, what I call the average grade of 9.6, and I actually come up with 34.4 feet, which is about 34 feet 5 inches. So I come out actually about 1 inch less than what this is, but it's, there's no grading change proposed on this site. So finished grade, as you see, is pretty much the same as the average grade here. And so the roof peak itself, it's not labeled on here, but I measured off of here approximately, is 27.8 feet tall, as opposed to the existing is 14.8. So it's going, and 3 feet of that raising up is because of the flood zone. So it is getting 10 feet taller, but that's not out of the question when they're making, you know, a second floor on it. It's typical for that. As mentioned in the Board of Health referral, we do have a proposed septic system going in here. I mean, right now, there's an undersized cesspool on there. There's no septic tank and just the cesspool. And of course, there's no access to it. Even if they had wanted to upgrade it in the past, they couldn't because they couldn't get to it. So now is the time to get through there and put in the new septic system, which conforms to Title V as closely as possible. And one thing is that it's not as deep as a leaching pit and it's spread out, so it will better protect the environment. And we do have the septic tank, which is not on the existing septic system. There are a number of divergences. I think, I was away for a while, but I think we have Board of Health on Monday coming up. And I can say generally upgrades with the same number of bedrooms, perhaps with some changes, but typically upgrades are approved, even if we have to change some details on the plan. And it also is going to conservation, just with an RDA. They have not expressed any problems with this plan. We are adding roof drainage where we can. Again, we have to stay 25 feet away from the septic system with this, but we're using the same type of infiltrators from the septic system and 3 pairs of them to take roof drainage in the front and the right side of the yard, to take that roof drainage so there will not be drainage going into the Grand Ave, the public way that the town engineer was speaking of. So this I would say that the site is adequate in terms of size. It has been used as a single-family house since 1930, and it is still proposed to be a single-family house. It is just being a slightly larger single-family house. I should point out, I didn't get to it, the coverage. The coverage by structures is being reduced by 106 feet. It's going from 45.4% to 41.95%. On a small lot, 100 square feet goes a long way. That's like a 4% drop, or 3% drop, just from 100 square feet of reduction. And the coverage by structures, paving, and parking is likewise going down. There actually is no paving proposed on this parcel, but we do count 2 parking spaces, 2 9x18 parking spaces toward the coverage by parking. That's why we show an increase that coverage is greater, but there actually is no paving per se on this property. For now, it's just intended to remain as it is, the stone surface, which affords good drainage again, so that the water won't go into the road. And I'd say that this house is still, this house is similar to what's there now. And I think it's still in keeping with the character of the Heights, Falmouth Heights in general. And so I'll take any questions or any comments.
Jerry, do you want to start us off?
No comments.
No comments.
Ken?
What are the heights of the surrounding structures?
The heights of the surrounding structure, we didn't measure them. They are lower than this. Do you have any information on the height of the?
You've got lot coverage calculations in the file? And it'll address the height of, not the height, but the size, 1.5, 2-story. It was submitted by Attorney Nickerson.
Can't really tell from the aerial photo. I mean, the chapel is, I mean, certainly some are higher, the ones across the road, 2-story, full 2.5-story houses, one across the road. The chapel, I don't know the height of the roof, but that's up there. The one at 456 is at least a 2-story house, that apartment or condominium building. I mean, I can't remember what this one was. I think, what's that, 34 Deacons Ave? Is that one?
34 is a 2.
34 is a 2, I mean, where's that? Oh, 34, yeah,
Miss
is a- okay,
460.
I see, a 2-story condominium, 4 Deacons Ave, which must be north of there, is a 2-story condominium. There are a lot of 2-story buildings around there, but then some of them are still 1 and 1.5. And all the houses down this, when they change hands, most likely they'll be rebuilt. They'll have to go up 3 feet to get above the flood zone themselves.
Okay, thank you.
There was a note in the file, I guess from engineering, that the fencing in front is on the road layout, so that would be removed?
We'll have to, it's either removed or seek a license from the selectmen.
And then the side fencing shown on the plan, looks like that's on the adjacent properties. Is that their fence, or is that the adjacent properties?
Well, being on the adjacent, I mean, it looks like it's theirs, but it's, right now, the 2 fences, I think, are 52 feet apart, and the property is 51 feet. So, I mean, we show it, frankly, I think both of them are, just a little barely on the other side, but
And the
basically down the property line.
And the trellising that's on that top deck, that's only on part of the deck? It doesn't cover the whole deck?
It's on the,
Just the front portion?
with this up here?
Yeah.
That's, just above the, well, in plan view, it's that much of the deck, I guess. Where's the plan?
There you go.
You can see in that view, there's,
Okay,
it's
just
just,
go.
it's not the full width of where it's 2-story, and it's also not the full depth of where the deck is.
That's all I have.
Is the trellis included in the height of the structure?
Yes, that's on this
34.
elevation drawing here. Whoops. It's 34, this plan is 34 6 above grade, and I calculated 34 feet 5 inches above grade to that.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
I'm not sure if it matters, but isn't that really a pergola rather than a trellis? You don't know, okay.
Well, there's an architect, how can I argue with an architect? Could be.
Sari, any questions? Okay, any comments, questions, concerns from members of the public? Seeing none, how would the board like to proceed?
Should we have some discussion on the board, or?
If you'd like to start us off, Mike?
Yeah, I just questioned the trellis on the height. I know it seems like an architectural feature, but I understand you have to raise the buildings, but considering the, chapel next door and the surrounding buildings, I'm wondering if they could do it without the trellis on the upper portion.
What is the actual height from the building to the top of the trellis? Can you give us that?
Yes, the roof peak is 27.8 feet, and the house is 34.4 minus 20, that's 6.6 feet.
Just in regard to the trellis, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I don't think it's a necessary feature for the house, but it's also not exactly a deal breaker for me in terms of approving the project.
I'm sure on a roof deck, some type of shade or something, and that's what people are using. I think that's what they're going for there.
I guess I actually like the architectural detail. I think it's in keeping with the coastal community. I don't think it's a bulk issue. I think it brings it brings more character to the area. And pergolas are used to block the sun, so are trellises.
That was smooth.
Anyone else?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's minor, it's not really adding a lot of bulk, the trellis, or the pergola. And I can see how it would be useful for shade. So I think I'm okay with it.
Okay. Does anyone have any other comments about the project that they want to bring up?
No.
All right. How would we like to proceed?
Close the hearing?
All right.
Second
Motion to close the hearing by Jerry, second by Ed. All those in favor?
it. Aye.
Aye. Don't everyone jump at once.
I made the last one.
You
Tag,
did.
you're it. Let's go.
All right, I'll move in favor.
All right.
Second.
Ken moves in favor, Ed seconds, findings and conditions.
I think the most significant finding probably is there's a slight reduction in lot coverage from 45 to 41 and change by, I think it's structures.
Yes,
Is it?
uh-huh.
Structures, I think, right?
The elimination of a cesspool is
Yeah, significant
fantastic.
upgrade in the septic. Trying to remember the bedroom count. That's staying the same?
Three.
Drainage proposed at the front and north side?
Mm-hmm.
Is that per plan?
Well, these are findings, so.
Still per plan.
There's no actual paving proposed. It's
No.
all It's all pervious surface. The upper roof deck is roughly comparable to the one that currently exists. I believe that was the testimony.
I believe it was. All right.
And,
It fits 24216, 243C. It's not more detrimental than what currently exists. It's in keeping with the neighborhood. How about those?
yep, and it's certainly, I guess the other thing is that, it now meets the flood regulations.
Any other findings?
I can't think of any.
I think we have it. Conditions?
Conditions would
Build it
be
like the drawings.
as
Per
per,
plan.
as per plan, and then 3 bedrooms.
All right. So that motion was made by Ken.
Do we need to make any finding where the engineering said that the fence is on
I
the road layout?
can't hear you.
That the fence is on the road layout from the engineer, do we have to make a finding on that, or?
Well, the fence is in the road layout, I would definitely make that
That is
a
fine.
finding. And the condition would be that the applicant
Get a license from the?
seek either a license from the selectmen or put the fence on subject property.
That sounds like a good condition.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? And that motion was made by Ken and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jeff. Okay.
Moving to our open meeting agenda items, we have the minutes of September 6, 2018. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Any proposed changes at all?
Just change
the No. name,
Thank you. All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes made by Bob. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Everyone voting?
I abstain.
Okay.
I wasn't here.
4 to 1, Ken abstain.
4 to 0 to 1.
Thank you.
Who abstained, Ken? Good night, Mr. Gardy.
Yankee fans?
We're not southern.
Well, wait a minute, we can't go there.
Thank you.
Up next, we have a board administrative review for amending application 92-6 to remove condition 10 to allow retail sales, which is a by right use under 240-36A. Sari?
When the board issued this special permit for Mr. Miskowski to operate a nursery there, he requested relief under the bylaw to allow vehicles over 13,000 gross vehicle weight, according to 240-38G4, I hope. I'm pretty sure.
Sounds right.
I'm pretty sure I'm right.
There you go.
In reviewing the bylaws, retail sales from a nursery is a by right. And I believe I put that in the note to you guys under 240-38. I think it's a by right use under 240-34. Shoot. Sorry, it's late.
240-36A is what it says in there.
Thank you for reading that, actually. So Mr. Miskowski is desirous of having that retail sales condition lifted, condition 10. I don't know, I think Ken, no, Ken, you weren't even on the board then. I don't think any of you were. Mr. Miskowski was asked at the hearing if he planned any retail sales, and he said not at that time. So they put a condition on it. It is a by right under the agricultural use of nursery.
In other words, he doesn't need the condition.
No. And he does a lot of educational things where people come in, he teaches them how to plant, different things like that. And he would like to do some retail sales. So he is requesting that to be removed.
I think it makes sense to remove it,
I agree.
by
I've been
right,
down
so-
there, the sales.
since it's a by right use.
Yep.
How does everyone feel about that?
I agree.
All right. Do we need a motion? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a board approval.
So
Anyone wants to
motion,
make it?
motion to remove the condition?
All right, motion was made by Bob. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your board administrative approval. Oh, I should have told you. I apologize. Paul's here. You could have asked him questions. I'm so sorry.
It's a by right.
I'm trying to get the meeting over with.
Thank you for
We'll
coming.
never stop talking.
I apologize,
I know you waited a
Paul.
while, so thank you for coming.
I just have a quick question.
At the
You
mic.
know, properties that are down, like, in the wetland, like, right next to the wetlands, is it a big deal to do denitrification? Like, you know, talking about all the problems we're having with the wetland spaces, and I know that there was a time when it seemed to be more important or more of a hot topic. Is it harder, or does it need more land? Is
think it has to do with the development, the type of development, the use. And they are putting stricter regulations in, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's coming back to that. Excuse me.
It's
I
more
think-
expensive, for
Well,
sure.
I know that, but I mean, you talk about doing a renovation, $400,000-$500,000.
So what's the new septic tank then? $1,000 No, I didn't mean, go to the Board of Health.
I'm not throwing stones, I just trying to understand. 'Cause it's
Yeah, and that is,
It is a hot
you know, a
topic.
40, on a 40B or something like that, this board can condition it, but
Yeah.
normally it's under the purview of the Board of Health,
So
and now
that's where it
becoming,
starts, and if they don't recommend it, then.
Well, that's the biggest
Cons-
problem. From our point of view, I think we don't have any regulatory,
no.
we don't have a whole lot of regulatory
Yeah.
power to demand that.
Right,
Conservation and Board of Health certainly do.
yeah.
And, the coastal pond overlay is frequently invoked, but it actually says unless you've got 5 acres or more, or 5 lots, doesn't apply,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, that's right, thank you.
Thank you. You guys do a great job.
Thank you again for coming in.
Good night.
Yeah.
Coming up next, we have, what is it?
Signing of the proposed subdivision for the 40B of your Habitat for Humanity that you approved. So I need signatures. Don't help me here.
Oh, sorry. Well, I am recused on this, so I can't help it.
Right. So
Just
there is
kidding.
places, I apologize, Ken, to put it right in front
Well,
of
that's
you.
all right.
So if you will sign,
But you don't
Who
want me
can
to
sign?
sign.
no,
I can't remember.
Ken cannot sign.
I don't
And
think,
no, you have to use this pen.
can I sign?
So do it small,
I don't think I was here.
Where it is here?
yes. We only need 3 on a 40B.
Okay. Is that for recording at the registry?
Yes.
Surprised they don't require mine.
Nice signature.
You've got a few more to do there, bud.
They can't just,
Are these Mylars?
Yes,
Oh, they are mine.
not all of them.
Nice.
One more. Thank you. I think all we need is 3. Right? Why did we give us so many?
If they want to be double sure.
you're doing just in case?
Did they
No,
confuse it?
we don't need
Because there's
any
like,
more
there's
than
like
3.
8 of them.
Right, plus by the time you do
Just do 3, please. Just 3. Please. And then I will fill in the rest. The date of the comprehensive permit is the day that it was filed with the town clerk. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Happens every meeting. This chair goes to the floor, every meeting.
We gotta get that file.
I think he switched it back. I did earlier, and then I moved him to the seat.
All right, and while we're getting the last signatures on there, board updates, does anyone have anything?
Remind the board that next Thursday is the joint meeting with the planning board
Didn't we already have that?
That
to
it is, we're having
discuss
another.
recodification of the bylaws. You were having another one.
I can't be there.
Okay.
Thursday, what time?
6 o'clock.
6, joint meeting,
The planning board.
PB, and in here?
Yes.
All right, procedural rules and policies, we'll table that for
Somebody's
another
working on
time.
that.
And any future agenda items?
I'm not gonna sign because I can't remember.
Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Okay.
Right.